everyone! So today I will be showing you how I made this Teen Titans communicator. My communicator is actually made out of an old makeup container, and so I have three little sections where I'm probably going to be storing all my bobby pins and hair ties for the convention. If any of you guys follow me on social media, you will see that I posted a lot that I would be cosplaying as Starfire for ASIN this year. I'm not. I'm actually going to be cosplaying as Terra, and after I get through all the tips, I'll show you guys how I did her costume and how you guys can do something similar just to make it easier for everyone, because I know I've had moments where I was working on my communicator and my Terra cosplay and just had no idea what I was doing, and I noticed there was a huge lack of tutorials, and so I was kind of freaking out a little bit. I had a friend who told me that she actually used one of those pocket hairbrush with the mirror. However, I didn't want to do that just because I figured if you painted the T on there and then tried opening it, it would kind of mess with the design a little bit. And so I just made mine out of a makeup container. And also you don't get like that weird ridge that those hairbrushes tend to have. So I'm going to show you guys a few steps on how I did that. Hopefully, if you guys are having a little trouble with some of the aspects that go into making this. And then I will show you guys how I made my Terra cosplay. Okay, so obviously, as I said before, how I made this communicator is I used a makeup palette, or an old makeup palette. And the brand is L'Oreal True Match, and I just picked this one because I really like the overall, I'll actually turn this around so you can see it. It just had a pretty good round shape. It didn't have any weird things that kind of stuck out and made it look, I guess, less circular and, you know, a little different. But a few other things you could use are, hi Roshi. A few other things you could use would be some kind of makeup palette like this. I mean, just anything circular, basically. Obviously, this one's a little bit smaller than most people like to use for communicators, so you can use something like this, which is a little bigger. The only thing I didn't like about it is that it has these kind of weird hinges that I just thought didn't look right. And then it also isn't nearly as thick as this one is, which I just thought was perfect for a communicator. But another thing you can use is, here's a little bronzer palette, and it has a little bit less of the hinges. It's a little more circular and a kind of interesting shape. So you can use something like this. So basically anything circular like these makeup palettes. Or as mentioned before, and I'm really glad that Noodle, and I will post a link to her account below because you guys should seriously check her out. She's really talented. I'm really glad that she pointed this out to me. She actually used a hairbrush, and this is those little handheld hairbrushes that I'm talking about. Handheld hairbrush. One of those pocket hairbrushes that I was talking about earlier, but as I said, when you open and close it, I just thought that it would kind of mess with the design a little bit. And that shouldn't be too much of a problem if you're going to put the design up front, and then again you kind of run into the problem of those hinges. But if this is what you have to hand, and if this is, you know, the look that you're going for, you can totally use that. That's all right. Another option that you might have, here it is using clay. And the clay I used for it is Polyform Model Air Clay. And this works really well, and it dries really light. So it's good to use, especially if you're using one of these plastic makeup containers or hairbrush here. And so you can probably use the clay to fill in a little of those gaps, but then I don't know if you'd be able to open it. However, you are going to need the clay no matter what. And I used air dry clay because it was just easier. You could mold it right onto the communicator, and then it would just dry there, and you didn't have to worry about it. However, you will also need E6000. And I don't know why this is on there. I guess it broke, and so Roshi tied it on there. But you will need that to attach the buttons as well as the little port. The antenna, I actually used an old makeup brush that I don't have anymore because it broke, and I had absolutely no other use for it other than to put it on my communicator because it looked like the antenna. So you can use anything like a broken makeup brush or a broken paintbrush or just anything along those lines that you do not use anymore. So, and then for the buttons, obviously you'll need the clay. You'll also need silver paint. Now I know traditionally the Teen Titans communicators, the T symbol is outlined? Yeah, outlined. Thank you. Usually the Teen Titans symbol is outlined in white, traditionally. But I thought the silver would give it a much cooler look, much more like spy look. And also I bought this whole thing of 3D silver paint and was only going to use it for the antenna. So I decided to trace that. There I go, using the word trace again. So you'll need silver paint. And obviously this is the Teen Titans communicator, so you'll need yellow paint as well. We'll need this later on in the tutorial if you're doing Terra like I did, and maybe even Robin. But you will need yellow paint, and this is actually tulip fabric paint, and like I said, you're going to need this later on in the tutorial, so it just makes sense to get it, and then you already have it to hand. You will need white paint. And these are actually the same brand, ironically enough, but this one's much older. To make the tea, you will need black paint, sandpaper, and you'll also need masking tape. However, I can't find my masking tape right now. I just used it a couple days ago, actually, and I just don't know where it's at. The Cosplay bunnies stole it. So what you're going to do next is, depending on whatever it is that you are using, and hopefully you guys kind of ran into the same thing I did where it already had that circle mirror sort of thing cut out. A lot of them do, to show you what color it is. So, I forgot where I was going with that. Okay, I remember. You're going to paint everything that isn't that little circle yellow. And if it doesn't have it like this, you'll actually just trace where you want the pattern, or where you want the symbol to be in the center, and then paint around that yellow. And it's just going to be so much easier, because then you'll then paint the symbol black, and then using your masking tape to get straight edges, you'll paint the white T. And sometimes it's actually easier just to paint the T on first and then fill it in with black, but I found it was just easier to paint the entire thing black and then paint on the T. And then, like I said, if there's any mishaps, just fill it in with yellow. I mean, it's real easy to fix any little mistakes. You might notice if you look real closely at mine, I had the black paint and the silver paint bleed into the yellow a little bit, but just clean it up with a Q-tip and it'll be just fine. So once you paint the whole thing yellow and then you get the symbol on there, what I did, like I said, and it's so much easier if you get a bottle of paint with a little nozzle on it. It makes applying it so much easier. And this is actually 3D fabric paint, so it was kind of made thinner so it would stand up 3D, and it just gives it a much cooler look. So you would just trace the symbol. And then, like I said, you paint the entire thing yellow, you fill in any mistakes, and then I find it easiest to draw on the little designs here and here with Sharpie. I mean, that's just me. You can fill it in with the paint, which I later on did with a detail brush, but I just thought it was easier just to draw them out in Sharpie so you could see what you were doing. So, on to the hard part that you're going to need your clay for. Like I said, I used Polyform Model Air, and I'll post links to that in the description. You should be able to get it at any craft store, really. I got mine at Joann's for only $7. It was on sale, so coupons will be your best friend. I think it usually runs for about $14, so it's not too bad. You get this big bag of clay, and it works really well. I actually used it for my noodle mask here. Obviously, it doesn't have its design yet, but it's really lightweight, and then the best part is that you can sand it. So then what you're going to do is, you're going to take, how much clay do I have here? Well, you're going to take like a little ball of clay, and it really depends on what you use. But you're going to pick a side, and you're going to try and work it into the side as best you can and smooth it as best you can. Obviously, mine isn't perfect. Yours won't be either. But you're going to try doing that as best you can. And you're going to try and make this top part squared off. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your little broken paintbrush or antenna thing, whatever you decide to use, and you'll just put that on top. And make sure that there's clay that you can kind of fill in any of the gaps with, and that's actually just going to keep it in place. If you're like me and you're really paranoid about the stuff falling apart, that's where the E6000 glue comes in. Just put a little bit on the bottom and put it into the clay. And then also be sure to glue the clay down, especially because when it dries, if you don't glue it down, it can just flake off, and then you have to work it back into the sides, which is way more difficult now that it's dry. But you'll make just a little port in the side like that, and it's real easy. But then be sure and do this while you're painting it as well. Make sure, especially if you plan on using this as a little carry case for hair elastics or bobby pins or anything like that, always check to make sure that you didn't paint it shut, or that you didn't get any clay under there or get any glue in there, because there was many a times while I was making this and thought that I was never going to get it open again because I had so much paint stuck in there. So just be sure to open it in between coats. Make sure that there's nothing stuck in there, that you can still close it all the way. And then what you're going to do is for the buttons, I just rolled 2 tiny little balls of clay, stuck them on where I needed them, and make sure that they stick onto the communicator without glue. And it's going to make your life so much easier, because then when you take them off to glue them down, they're going to stick. And I painted those red before gluing them down. And it's easiest to get yourself some double-sided tape, stick it onto a flat surface, and then stick the little buttons on there, and then you can paint them red. And then I just lined them with a Sharpie to kind of give them a little more interesting of a look. So then you'll glue those on there, and you can stop here with the communicator. It's basically finished at this point. However, I still need to fill in some of the sides that some of the Sharpie bled onto, and then I also need to fill in the back. But what I'm going to do with the back is I'm going to get a clip, maybe like a tie clip, or even one of those clips that you get off the back of a measuring tape, and stick that to the back, because I will be using this for my communicator. Or I'll be using this so it can stick onto my utility belt. So there's a few tips and tricks to make your own Teen Titans communicator. I know it's not a complete tutorial, and I apologize for that. However, I had already made the communicator, and it was at least 3 o'clock in the morning, and I realized that I hadn't filmed any part of the process, and there would really be no point in refilming the whole thing, since everyone in our cosplay group is currently making their own communicators, so I'd have 2 communicators.